It's time for Overtime.
Now that's a tourist attraction.
In the world of sports, it's all about the playmakers in today's headlines, from locals to the pros, with interviews from local standouts and sports all-stars across the country that will have you talking.
Turn, shoot, scores! There he is! All hail the new king in town!
Hear from coaches to players, sports analysts, and broadcasters who are a part of the action every day. Overtime, now with Bert Ramin on ESPN 102.3 AM 1000 KSOO, Sioux Falls sports leader.
Right back with you. It's hour number 2 on a Monday. Thanks so much for tuning us in, as always, right here on your Sioux Falls sports leader. I'm your host, Bert Ramin. You can track me down at any time on Twitter, before, during, or after the show at Bert ESPN. And as always, we're your sports haven. You can weigh in on the show at any time. 605-362-3776. The number to dial, 362-3776. Still to come on today's program, RJ Ochoa of Blogging the Boys. That is the Cowboys. We'll be talking all things Dallas Cowboys, rewinding to their draft class, who stood out, who was less than stellar draft pick. We'll debate it all with RJ Ochoa. We'll also talk about the glaring needs for the Cowboys, and one that they continually ignored, not just in the draft, but in undrafted free agency. They brought back Zeke Elliott. They got Rico Dowdle and a few other guys who maybe, just maybe, could make a difference in the backfield, including Deuce Vaughn, one of the favorite little guys in recent college football memory. But the Cowboys have a huge need at running back, still gearing it up for the season in which they should be and could be another deep playoff contender. But that's a big issue on a very talented offense there in Dallas. We'll be talking with RJ Ochoa here before too long on this Monday edition of the show. Also get you the latest and greatest news from the National Football League, including an announcement of the season opening game. The entire NFL schedule be announced on Wednesday night. We got little news and nuggets popping out about marquee matchups, including the season opener for the Kansas City Chiefs. We'll tell you the when, the where, the how of all of that and more, with the latest from the NFL around 12:35-ish. And we'll round out today's show with the latest in the good, the bad, and the ugly. Good mix of everything in the NHL over the weekend, good, bad, or otherwise. First things first, last night, Florida and Boston went at it in Game 4, and the Panthers take a stranglehold lead on the series.
As now the puck brought on by Barkov into the slot, makes a move, shot, he scores! Barkov, what a move, in on net, and he's able to give the Panthers their first lead of the game. 12:29 to go in the third. Barkov got through everyone.
WQAM there with the audio. Otherwise, the other final last night, north of the border, Vancouver and Edmonton went back and forth. This highlight courtesy of SN 650. The Canucks get the win and take a series advantage 2-1.
Besser gets it, start of the goal, attempted a centering feed for Pedersen in front. It's broken up by Suter in the slot. Down low to Besser, driving the goal. He scores! Brock Besser with 1:26 left in the first period finds the back of the net again. And it's 3-1 Canucks in Game 3.
Vancouver now leads the series 2-1. Tonight in the NHL, Hurricanes at Rangers Game 5, 6 o'clock puck drop on ESPN. Rangers looking to close out that series against the Canes. They lead it 3-1. Series not closeoutable for Dallas tonight, but certainly a big advantage and opportunity on the road at in Denver against the Colorado Avalanche. That's Game 4, 8:30 start time on ESPN. NBA Finals from yesterday, Knicks and the Pacers back and forth, but this one feel like it was over pretty early at the half. Indiana was up huge.
8 seconds to go. Halliburton works, steps back to his left. A three is good. 69 first half points for Indiana.
69 first half points indeed. Indiana would win the contest 121-89. Seismic shift in the series since Friday, as that series now tied 2 games apiece. Tyrese Halliburton, 20 points and 6 rebounds in the win for the Pacers. Series now shifts back to MSG for Game 5. Shifting back to Denver for Game 5 now. Minnesota fans may have thought they could have had a 3-1 series lead or a sweep over the defending champion Nuggets when we were talking to you guys on Friday. But we're back 2-2, exactly where we started. It's a dead heat between the defending champs and the Minnesota Timberwolves. The Nuggets, with a tremendous sequence at the end of the first half that ended up playing a huge role in the victory in Game 4.
Loose ball, Jokic, front court corner, two hands. Denver's dropped 61 on Minnesota. They throw it away. Murray three. Oh, my God! From behind the half court line,
Everybody's falling asleep except for me and Jamal Murray. He knocked that thing home.
Unbelievable sequence there to put Denver up 15 at the halftime break on the road. They were challenged late, but Minnesota certainly did not meet expectations down the stretch. Several missed free throws and a troubling plus-minus when it comes to Anthony Edwards being on the floor versus off the floor. In case you missed it earlier in the show, we've referenced it a couple times, but last night when Anthony Edwards was on the floor, he played over 45 minutes of the game. Minnesota was the better team by 5 points when Edwards was on the floor, but in the 2.5 minutes he was off last night, it was glaring and stark, the difference, as Denver 13 points better than Minnesota over those 2.5 minutes that Edwards was not on the floor. When it comes to those Denver Nuggets, head coach Michael Malone says, hey, this series ain't done. We're proud of where we are, but we got work to do.
This series is a long way from being over. We're not celebrating. It's 2-2. So now you have to find a way to win game 5. But what I found about our group is that they do believe.
They do believe indeed. 2-2 the series there. Jokic last night, 35 points, 7 rebounds, and 7 assists. And tonight in the NBA, it's a pair of game 4s going on. First from Cleveland at 6 o'clock on TNT. Celtics at Cavs. Boston holds a 2-1 series advantage there. Thunder at Mavericks from Dallas, 8:30 on TNT. Game 4, where Dallas currently holds a 2-1 advantage in the series. Major League Baseball finals from yesterday took extra innings, but the Cubs get a road win over Pittsburgh in extras 5-4. Chicago now 24-17. Minnesota Twins keep on winning. Good series against the Toronto Blue Jays. They won yesterday 5-1 the final.
A 2-0 hit well. Right center field. Varsho chasing after it, looking up, and it's gone.
Yes.
A home run for the 3rd consecutive game for Carlos Santana. He breaks the ice in a big-time way. And the Twins lead 3-0.
Twins would win it yesterday 5-1. Bailey Ober with his 4th win of the season. He's 4-1 with a 3.77 ERA. Other finals, Detroit lost at home to Houston 9-3. And Cleveland, a team that everyone continues to chase in the division, gets a win 7-0 dominant style on the south side over the White Sox.
The 1-0, and that swung on and lifted high in the air to left. This one's hit a ton, and it's out of here. Home run, David Fry.
7-0 the final. Cleveland 25-16. And as of right now, Cleveland just a half game better than both Minnesota and Kansas City in the AL Central. Twins are off today and tonight in Major League Baseball. Marlins at Tigers leads us off at 5:40. Other games, Cubs visit the Braves in Atlanta. Brewers are home to the Pirates. White Sox host the Nationals. Guardians visit the Rangers at 7:05. On Mondays, we'll always try to give you this wide scope look at the standings. American League East right now. Baltimore is a half game better than the Yankees. 5.5 games better than the Red Sox. Rays and Blue Jays rounded out. AL West, it's the Mariners, a half game better than the Rangers for the top spot there. Oakland 3.5 games back, followed by Houston and the Angels. And the AL Central just as narrow at the top. Cleveland is 25-16, a half game better than the Twins at 24-16, and a half game better than the Royals, 25-17. Their record, Tigers and White Sox rounded out with your American League standings. No big news from the National Football League. The schedule releases the next big offseason milestone that looms coming up on Wednesday night. NASCAR race over the weekend. Brad Keselowski beats the field at Darlington, followed by Ty Gibbs and Josh Berry. Next race is All-Star Weekend for North Wilkesboro Speedway in North Carolina on Sunday. Coverage there begins at 4:30 on Fox Sports 1. PGA Tour Golf, Rory McIlroy with a dominant performance at the Wells Fargo Championship in Charlotte. 17 under par. Second place was Xander Schauffele at 12 under. Next up for the PGA Tour, it's the PGA Championship from Valhalla, Thursday through Sunday from Louisville, Kentucky. Now into your Reliabank headlines of the day. Augustana softball exploded at the plate as it cruised to a 9-2 win over top-seeded Pittsburgh State and punched their ticket to the NCAA Super Regional Round. The Vikings compiled 10 hits and 7 walks throughout the game, while Grace Glanzer pitched a 2-run complete game. Desi Cuevas had 3 hits on the day, including a 2-run bomb over the left field fence in the top of the 7th. Final score, Augie 9, Pittsburgh State 2. Augie next will face Rogers State in a best-of-3 series on Tuesday and Wednesday from down in Claremore, Oklahoma. South Dakota State was unable to earn a victory in 2 meetings against Omaha in the 2024 Summit League Softball Championships on Saturday as the Mavericks claim the tournament title and end the season for the Jackrabbits. Omaha won Game 1 5-2 and Game 2 7-0 on Saturday at Jackrabbit Softball Stadium. And the season comes to an abrupt and surprising end for South Dakota State with a record of 33-22. Omaha moving on with a record of 41-13 on the season. Just talked about Augie softball. Now some Augie baseball talk. For the first time since back in 2019, the Augustana Vikings are both NSIC tournament champions and more. The Vikings knocked off Minnesota State 8-3 in the championship game on Saturday afternoon to punch their ticket into the NCAA tournament. The victory gives Augie their 4th tournament title in program history, and it marks just the 2nd time in program history that the team won both the regular season and the tournament title within the Northern Sun. Only other team to do that back in 2019. It was a big day, or big weekend for Augustana softball and Augie baseball. The Vikings now with a record of 45-8, ride a 10-game win streak into the NCAA selection show last night, and now we've got their destination moving forward for the 6th consecutive season. Augie baseball is headed to the NCAA tournament. They will take on they are the 4th seed in the Central region. They'll head to Warrensburg, Missouri to face 5th seeded Central Oklahoma in their first game. Central Missouri also in their immediate bracket. They'll serve as the host, and they'll take on fellow NSIC squad Minnesota State in that first round. In the region's second pod, number 2 seed Missouri Southern State plays host to Arkansas Tech. Number 6 Arkansas Monticello and Harding, the other teams there. Stay tuned for softball and baseball. GoAugie.com. GoAugie.com/live for all the latest news in regards to your Vikings softball and baseball teams. Facing a must-win situation to keep their postseason hopes alive, South Dakota State answered the call yesterday, rallying from a 4-0 deficit to earn an 8-5 win over North Dakota State in the finale of a 3-game Summit League baseball series yesterday afternoon at Irv Huther Field. The Jackrabbits with the win are now 19-27. They're 10-15 in league play. And for the Bison, they're 18-26-1, 13-10-1 in Summit League play. Up next, the Jackrabbits close out their regular season by playing host to the Omaha Mavericks. 3-game series coming up May 16th through the 18th at home. Thursday's series opener is set for a 3 o'clock start time, once again from up in Brookings. Last but most certainly not least here, you're closing out your Reliabank headlines of the day. Nikola Jokic burned a double team, found Kentavious Caldwell-Pope for an open 3, and then notched a steal and hit a streaking Michael Porter Jr. for a fast break dunk before, as we heard moments ago, Jamal Murray drained an obnoxious 55-foot heave at the buzzer to enter the halftime break last night, up by 15. The flurry left the Timberwolves and Target Center crowd stunned while propelling Denver to an ultimate win, 115-107. Michael Malone commenting post-game saying, never underestimate the heart of a champion. That is right. I thought Denver would punch back. I certainly didn't think it would be 2-2. I thought it was 3-1. I thought Denver would find a way to win one game, and I thought it was more likely it would be game 3 than 4. Sure enough, we got the game 3 in a tremendously disappointing effort and result for Minnesota. Fans were very elated to be back exactly where they were last night and had high expectations again for Minnesota. Unfortunately, it goes the way of Denver once again, and the Nuggets back once again favored to win the series. But Anthony Edwards fired up post-game saying, hey, we're not done yet either. And it's exactly where we thought they'd be, 2-2 in a very entertaining series. It's just not the way that we thought it would go, with nobody winning on their home floor as of yet. But wildly entertaining stuff from the Timberwolves and the Nuggets thus far, and that's just one of a very entertaining 4 series underway in the NBA postseason. We'll take the break, come back talking Dallas Cowboys, greater NFL, and more. RJ Ochoa, who is the manager and editor-in-chief of Blogging the Boys, one of the best places to find Dallas Cowboys news, bloggingtheboys.com, part of the SB Nation tier there. He'll join us coming up next on this Monday edition of Overtime.
college hoops and NBA basketball, the NFL and Major League Baseball. It's all here on ESPN 102.3 and AM 1000 KSOO, Sioux Falls sports leader.
Right back with you. It's the Monday edition of Overtime. Appreciate you tuning us in as always right here on your Sioux Falls sports leader. We've broken down the NFL draft from a Packers perspective, Chiefs perspective, Broncos perspective, and of course, we've talked about the Minnesota Vikings draft a ton, but one team that we haven't talked about is down south in Big D, the Dallas Cowboys. RJ Ochoa of Blogging the Boys Now will break down the Cowboys draft and talk about all the big storylines, including why the heck did this team avoid drafting a running back? That's one of many topics coming up here right now. RJ Ochoa on the ESPN hotline. RJ, welcome back to the show. How you doing?
I'm doing well, Bert. Great to be with you. Thanks so much for having me.
It's always great to talk ball with you. You can find RJ's work at bloggingtheboys.com, part of the SB Nation site there. Big draft takeaways from you, good and bad. I know the bad one probably, why did we pass on this running back, that running back? The running back we said was a great prospect, whatever it was, that's probably the bad. But what stood out in a good way for you for the draft for the Cowboys?
You know, ultimately, I think it was kind of chalk for Dallas at the top in terms of just positions of need, and I think that was really, really well received. You know, I'm a big fan of Survivor, and there's nothing like, you know, after they've been on the island for a week or 10 days or something like that, and they get access to just the smallest reward, right? Like, it's like, hey, we have, you know, just a couple of peanut butter and jelly sandwiches because you're so nutrient starved. That goes a long way. And this was kind of like that. This was, you know, just a bag of rice and a little piece of flint, but we were able to go back to camp and start a fire and cook something. And that certainly hadn't been the case over the offseason up until the draft.
RJ, let's talk a little bit about the offensive line there in Dallas, because you say goodbye to a couple notable guys over the last couple years, and now feels like it's a changing of the guard and some reinforcements on the way. Tyler Guyton, the first-round pick, Cooper Beebe, the third-round pick, and then, of course, opportunities in the later rounds as well, and an undrafted free agency. But how inspired are you or excited are you for this offensive line to stay pretty good or retool and perhaps get better moving forward?
You know, there are not a lot of areas that I, you know, would give the Cowboys the benefit of the doubt, but evaluation of top, you know, talent, certainly first-round offensive lineman is definitely one of them. And so coming away with Tyler Guyton, it was just such a kind of, you know, burst of wind in sales, as I was kind of mentioning. And the fact that Dallas was able to trade back, which they did obviously in the first round, and pick up that third-round draft pick, which became Cooper Beebe. So you kind of got these two dudes married and tied together for the foreseeable future as a result of all that. It's definitely exciting, and you know, it's obvious right now that Tyron Smith is gone and now a member of the New York Jets, but you know, the cold reality is we're not so far away from Zach Martin leaving the Cowboys. And so this is a group that has had kind of some familiar faces at the top for about a decade now, and it does feel like they have properly restocked and replenished the shelves to prepare for the future, to prepare for the beyond. And will there be a set or a step back at certain positions this season? Maybe certainly in the initial parts of it, absolutely. But I do feel like they are properly, you know, kind of stored and ready for the future to come at the most important part of the game, which is obviously in the trenches.
RJ Ochoa of Blogging the Boys, our guest here, Monday edition of Overtime. RJ, I know you can quantify this any way you want, but when it comes to you and covering the Cowboys, did you have a favorite draft pick that they made, or is it the obvious one in the first round of Tyler Guyton?
I think it's probably Cooper Beebe, and, you know, we ran a lot of polls and interacted with a lot of our followers, and that was kind of the consensus answer. And I think a little bit, you know, it does have to do with the fact that it does feel like you're cheating life a little bit, the fact that he was this extra draft pick that you picked up by moving down to the first round. But we tried so hard, honestly, to kind of manifest that, because this was a team that had so many needs and so many glaring holes, and it was just apparent there was no way that 3 top 100 picks was going to be enough for them to properly, you know, do what they needed to do. So the fact that they did that in and of itself was kind of this, you know, real big and sweet victory, to quote SpongeBob. But then the fact that they obviously took Cooper Beebe and kind of, you know, did what they did with the pick and landed it so specifically was really just quite the taste. And so Cooper Beebe is definitely the answer, I think, for a lot of people. He also kind of says and does the right thing. You know, he speaks in football terms and parlance, which people like. So Cooper Beebe is definitely the kind of house favorite right now.
All sorts of positions of need were addressed for the Dallas Cowboys. Tackle, edge rusher, guard, linebacker. They got reinforcements on defensive line, cornerback through the draft. But they avoided running backs in the draft. How surprised were you that they passed on the big backs and the good backs early, but just running backs in general? Were you pretty surprised that they didn't draft a single running back this year?
I'm certainly surprised from a logic standpoint, but from, understanding where we're at and the kind of rules of engagement that come along with the Dallas Cowboys, that, really wasn't that big of a shock. And I think, what sort of prepared a lot of Cowboys fans or helped Cowboys fans kind of brace for the reality was how much they were talking up Ezekiel Elliott in the immediate run-up to the draft. Obviously, they fielded questions about Zeke in their pre-draft press conference, in their press conference after the first round, and the conference third round. I mean, the writing wasn't on the wall as much as it was a neon sign that had taken on human life dancing around the room was going to come back. And so we also obviously knew and kind of projected that the deep run on the position was going to happen in the fourth round, and that they didn't have a fourth round draft pick because of the Trey Lance trade. And so when they chose to take Maris Leofau, the Notre Dame linebacker, with the 87th overall pick, the final selection for the third round for them, it became rather obvious that they had drawn their line in the sand and they were kind of prepared to bring Zeke back. And then I want to add that, I don't know if you recall, but the Zeke news was announced at like 5:45 a.m. the Monday after the draft. So this was this seems to have been something that was a long plan coming. And so in that respect, it isn't a shock that they didn't want anybody else available to take carries away from Zeke.
How big of an impact do you think that's going to make on the team this year? Because running the football isn't as important as it once was, and it isn't as important as it once was to have a bell cow back, but I'm not sure if the guys that are in-house right now can handle that running back by committee. So when you were looking at the Dallas Cowboys, that's the obvious hole on this team. How much do you think it impacts their season if the guys that are there today end up being the guys that are there in week one?
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, obviously running back is is the position that is most dependent on other circumstances around it, which is why it's been devalued or whatever verbiage you want to use. And obviously Zeke is longer in the tooth than he ever has been, just because that's the way the time works. And so I would offer that they probably have the worst running back room in the NFL. Yep. And that's, or at the very least, it's a significantly to be determined running back room. And it might wind up working out and they could fully have the last laugh if that's the case. But for this to be a committee, for this to be something, a situation where Zeke is, spelled in favor of somebody else, to your point, I don't know who that somebody else is right now. Is it Royce Freeman? Is it Deuce Vaughn? That just seems so impractical. The Cowboys everybody loves to reference the fact that Zeke had so many touchdowns during his last season with the team, which was the 2022 season. But part of that overall process was peak Tony Pollard. I mean, that was the Tony Pollard that the Cowboys felt was worth giving the franchise tag to that he played on a year ago. And so they certainly don't have that player. They don't. And even then, I know that, maybe for non-Cowboys fans, Tony Pollard, popped a little bit. Maybe they were unaware of him. Tony Pollard was a fourth-round draft pick in 2019. So it took, until the 2022 season for him to see significant workload. And I don't see that person. I don't see that path. It seems a lot like they are content with giving Zeke 80% of the work and just kind of divvying up the remainder however they can, in a moment's notice. But I definitely have my fair share of questions about how they're going to make it all work.
That's the big question for the Dallas Cowboys that doesn't have to mention Mike McCarthy or Dak Prescott heading into the season. RJ Ochoa of bloggingtheboys.com, our guest here, manager and editor-in-chief there. Lastly, schedule release coming up on Wednesday. I know that it's overblown, but I just wanted to make a mention here. The opponents that are on the slate for Dallas, this is going to be a tough schedule. They got Baltimore, San Francisco, Cincinnati, Detroit, and Houston, not to mention their division that's always pretty darn competitive. What do you make of the early portion of the schedule? Because we don't know the order of the games, but it seems like this is going to be a tough schedule for a team coming off a 12-5 finish.
Yeah, it's the first place schedule, obviously. That's why they drew the Lions and the Texans and whatnot. And I mean, I know that Micah and CJ Stroud had their disagreement about this on their draft show, but I think the AFC North is probably the most competitive division in the NFL right now. So the fact that the Cowboys are going to have to go through that on top of everything that you mentioned is just a really intimidating thing on paper. The schedule is sometimes a big stroke of luck. Obviously, that when you catch certain teams, certain moments, certain climates, certain environments, it looks very, very, very difficult right now. It looks, like they're swimming upstream, but they've kind of known that, obviously, for a long time and acted the way that they have in spite of it. So I'm excited to see everything. I'm excited to see who they draw on Thanksgiving and try to identify advantages and disadvantages they face. I'm sure, like me, you're finally able to start planning your fall and winter once this thing comes out. So I know my wife will be very happy once Wednesday rolls around.
Yeah, definitely getting the calendar boxed and checked here moving forward. RJ, last thing before we let you go, what to watch for in minicamp? Give us one player, one scenario, one position battle to watch in the next couple weeks for Dallas.
I think the chalk thing would be to say to watch all the contract extensions and therefore whether or not CeeDee Lamb is present, just because he's the only one who seemed willing to kind of flex things a little bit as he was absent from voluntary workouts. But in terms of on-the-field things, I think that if you'd asked me to rank the 10 most important people for the Dallas Cowboys this season, coaches and everybody involved, I think Mozzie Smith has to be on that list.
Yeah.
He might be number 10, but so much of what they're going to do defensively is dependent on him becoming the player that they thought he was when they drafted him in the first round last year. And so some of that honestly boils down to size. The Cowboys listed him at 328 pounds, which was his listed weight when they drafted him a year ago, and reportedly had him lose a bunch of weight. And so, so many people are anxious just to physically see Mozzie Smith and what he looks like, and certainly how he moves and how he's operating on an NFL field. So he's a big piece in what the Cowboys are going to be hopefully doing this season.
3 straight 12-5 seasons for the Dallas Cowboys and a very intriguing 2024 ahead. That's RJ Ochoa of Blogging the Boys. RJ, always a blast. We'll do it again soon. Thank you.
Of course. Thanks so much for having me.
All right. RJ Ochoa of Blogging the Boys. And again, that's an intriguing season coming up for the Dallas Cowboys because I think pretty highly of them. I certainly lost a lot of flavor and a lot of pizzazz for the Philadelphia Eagles following their obscure and baffling collapse down the stretch, which included a first-round postseason loss. Dallas also lost in the first round of the postseason, but again, Dallas just feels like they've got a little bit more steam and everything heading into next year, for me at least, than Philly. Philly firing the OC, the DC, bringing them back. It's the last gasp for Coach Sirianni this year. If Philly looks like they did last year at any point or an unceremonial exit from the postseason early, would not surprise me if the head coach is gone there. Mike McCarthy on thin ice. And back to Ezekiel Elliott one time here before we go to break. Talk about metrics, you talk about efficiency stats, everything. I like to keep it simple. I look at rushing yards, yards per carry, and other things on a player to determine how they're doing. I'm not going to look at the efficiency stuff and throw that your way because a lot of people, to a lot of fans, that stuff could be deemed as hogwash. But Ezekiel Elliott, the last 3 years, 2021 had 1,000 yards, 4.2 yards per carry, and scored 10 times. Last year in Dallas, 2 years ago, his last year in Dallas, what I'm trying to say, 876 yards, 12 touchdowns, 3.8 yards per carry. And in New England last year, he did score a total of 3 touchdowns, rushing, 2 receiving, was not efficient, 3.5 yards per carry. But Ezekiel Elliott is far removed from the 2019 season, his last Pro Bowl season, 1,357 yards, 12 touchdowns, 4.5 yards per carry, and also caught 54 balls that year. Zeke is not that guy anymore. They're going to have 3 or 4 backs in Dallas as the roster is currently constructed, carry the football on Sundays because Zeke is not a bell cow anymore, and he might not even be a compliment anymore. I'm not saying he should be a free agent. He's not awful, but he should be one of those guys that you bring in key moments. You need a big block. You need a big yard or 2. Zeke could probably get it for you, but he's far removed from being the dude in Dallas, and they might just end up treating him like one, and I think that's a mistake heading into 2024. RJ Ochoa, Vlogging the Boys. Again, find him at RJ Ochoa or vloggingtheboys.com, part of SB Nation. When we come back, more football talk on the way, the latest from the NFL. The schedule drops pretty soon, Wednesday night, for the schedule release for the Packers, the Vikings, the Broncos, the Chiefs, and the Bears, and everyone in our area and beyond for the National Football League. NFL talk continues next on Overtime.
The best coverage. We are ESPN 102.3 and AM 1000 KSOO, Sioux Falls sports leader.
Moving right along on this Monday edition of Overtime. Time to focus up once again on the National Football League. Not a tremendous amount of news over the weekend, but we'll get you everything you need to know right now, including the first announced game that has trickled out intentionally by the National Football League that features the defending champion Kansas City Chiefs. That in a moment. First things first, though, same division, different topic. Free agent outside linebacker Bud Dupree has officially signed with the Los Angeles Chargers. Dupree, who's 31, had a career renaissance last year, had 6.5 sacks and 39 tackles with 8 tackles for loss and 8 quarterback hits for the Atlanta Falcons. Quickly emerged as the team's top edge rusher in Atlanta's defensive scheme, often playing on many vital snaps. And again, Bud Dupree, far from when he was a big name in the league in the start of his career, a couple different places, but he's in for matching up with Khalil Mack and others, and Joey Bosa also in that unit for the LA Chargers, starting to look pretty darn formidable with some aging veterans, to be fair, but the Chargers looking to get that pass rush to get after one, Patrick Mahomes. The New Orleans Saints have agreed to terms with an offensive lineman, Lucas Patrick, former Bear, former Packer, on a 1-year deal, according to his agents Joel and Justin Turner. The 30-year-old spent the past 2 seasons with the Bears and started 15 games at center because of injuries. He allowed 25 hurries, 2 hits, and no sacks over 950 snaps, and he started 5 games for a Chicago team as a reserve guard in 2022, playing both left and right guard before a toe injury cost him the final 10 games of the season. Patrick cut his teeth as a member of the Green Bay Packers as an undrafted rookie free agent out of Duke back in 2016, followed former Bears offensive coordinator Luke Getsy from the Packers to Chicago in March, and he was initially signed as a free agent center, moved to backup role after training camp, but now in for some work in the New Orleans Saints offensive line that had a lot of turnover this year, including just before the NFL draft. Good news for Broncos fans. All reports so far on the efficiency, the attitude, and the look of rookie quarterback Bo Nix are positive. As a first-round draft pick, Bo Nix worked through his first rookie minicamp with the Broncos over the weekend. Coach Sean Payton said on Saturday he already gave the number 12 pick in the draft a little welcome to the NFL ribbing. I went into the quarterback meeting and I was just having fun with Bo, and I said I want to talk to the quarterback that's got 160 touchdown passes and he rushed for 30, 190 total. So Payton said, so we Wikipedia'd him. The quarterback was not Nix, but rather Colorado School of Mines' John Matocha, who was at the Broncos rookie minicamp as a tryout player this weekend. Matocha finished his 4-year career with the D2 or Diggers as college football's all-time touchdown leader when he threw for 162 touchdowns and ran for 30 more. It was the first day of a school moment for Nix, who went through the second of 3 full practices with the team's other rookies on Saturday. Expectations for Nix, who the Broncos made the 6th quarterback selected in the first round of the draft last month at number 12 overall, are already swirling. Nix went on to say, everything's new. You're learning a new offense, new teammates, new coaches, new practice style. Everything's new. You don't really know where to go. You kind of have to follow your position coach around. And Payton went on to say, so much of it is a huddle, snap count, break the huddle, under center, shotgun. It's a process. He's handling it well. And we had a pretty good practice today. He's grinding through it, and he's doing good with the challenge. So that's good, all things considered, that you get such a good report from Sean Payton. You wouldn't expect a negative report to be out there, although one that partially could be construed at negative is out on Drake May out in New England, just that he's still working on refining his game. He needs, quote-unquote, a lot of work, is the quote that's out there from a source at Pro Football Talk as of this morning. But again, not a whole lot negative that you can glean from minicamp at this stage. They're learning their new teammates. They're learning a new offense, how to break a huddle the Bronco way, how to go about things in a Sean Payton-controlled offense. Bo Nix certainly very experienced, and that is one thing that he has over just about every other quarterback prospect in the NFL draft this year. Michael Penix, similar experience, not as many games played, but Bo Nix extraordinarily experienced with his time at Auburn and most recently at Oregon. The latest from the NFL as of this morning is that the Kansas City Chiefs have learned of their Week 1 opponent. They'll attempt a three-peat when they host the Baltimore Ravens in the NFL's annual primetime season opener, the league announced today. The matchup to be played on Thursday night, September 5th at Arrowhead, is a rematch of last season's AFC title game, which the Chiefs won 17-10 before taking down San Francisco in Super Bowl 58. The season opener features two of the game's top quarterbacks, Patrick Mahomes, Super Bowl MVP the past 2 years, and reigning NFL MVP Lamar Jackson. Mahomes has dominated the matchup against Lamar, going 4-1 against him in his career, including the postseason. Last time Baltimore played in Kansas City was back in 2019 when the Chiefs won the game 33-28. The Ravens haven't won a game there in 12 years. It's been since 2012. And following the game announcement, we only had one spread up for a while. That's for Packers and Eagles, where the Eagles are a slim favorite down in Sao Paulo, Brazil, also on opening weekend. But the game's out. We'll get all sorts of spreads coming out very soon. This game announced, and immediately there's a spread attached. Chiefs are a 2.5-point opening favorite according to ESPN Bet. So there you have it. We got a couple spreads available already for the National Football League that won't be around until early September. September 5th, the official season opener, Ravens and Chiefs from Arrowhead Stadium. That news breaking as of this morning. We'll take the break, come back, and finish up the show with the good, the bad, and the ugly. Still so much to get to today and this week. Thanks for being along for the ride. Back to wrap up the show after this on a Monday.
Streaming live online and with the app, this is Overtime with Bert Ramin on ESPN 102.3 and AM 1000 KSOO, Sioux Falls sports leader.
Back to finish up the Monday edition of the show. Thanks so much for tuning us in all day long as we react to a disappointing weekend for the Minnesota Timberwolves. Are they done? I certainly don't think so. Don't hope so as we get tuned up for tomorrow night, Game 5 from out in Denver. That's not part of our good, the bad, the ugly, but certainly NBA talk to come because the Atlanta Hawks have illustrated a good trade up to, not all trade really, but they've illustrated really good luck to get all the way up to the top of the NBA draft, but it's at the behest of someone else and at the complete and total disappointment of another team as well. It's time to get you the latest and the greatest with the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Been the problem child today. Displayed their ugly side. Whined a bit too much and is now setting a bad example. Bert is calling out today's headline makers with the good, the bad, and the ugly.
All right, first things first, the West Coast Conference is getting a couple of new members. Grand Canyon University and Seattle University will join the WCC beginning in the 2025-2026 season, giving the league, best known nationally for its basketball programs, 11 full members for the first time in its history. The conference announced the additions on Friday, with the two schools set to leave their affiliations with the Western Athletic Conference after the next school year. The West Coast Conference's membership is mostly based now in California, with San Diego, Pepperdine, Loyola Marymount, Santa Clara, Pacific, San Francisco, and St. Mary's. The only two schools outside of the state are currently full members are Gonzaga and Portland. So makes a good deal of sense to add Grand Canyon, a team that's had some recent history in the tournament, and Seattle University, a regional fit to the new iteration of the West Coast Conference. On to the bad news. Unfortunate passing over the weekend. Former Chargers general manager A.J. Smith passed away on Sunday at the age of 75. An announcement from his family confirmed the news. Smith had been battling prostate cancer for the past 7 years. His family said in the announcement, which was released by the Falcons, Smith's son Kyle is the Atlanta Falcons assistant general manager. During a 35-year career in the National Football League, A.J. Smith rose from a part-time scout to general manager of the San Diego Chargers, and he held that role for 10 years, from 2003 to to 2012 and became the winningest general manager in franchise history as the Chargers won 98 games during that span, including postseason during his 10 years in the role. Passing away over the weekend, former Chargers general manager A.J. Smith at the age of 75. Now on to the ugly. It's really not ugly at all for the Atlanta Hawks, but really ugly for the city of Detroit and the Detroit Pistons. The Atlanta Hawks rocketed up the board to grab the number 1 pick in this year's NBA draft, winning the lottery last night for the first time in franchise history. The Hawks are 36-46 this past year and had a 10th place finish in the Eastern Conference, had a 3% chance to win the lottery, and that 3% chance came true. The 5th lowest odds by a team to win the number 1 pick since the lottery began back in 1985. The draft coming up late June from Brooklyn, June 26th through the 27th. The Washington Wizards, Houston Rockets, and San Antonio Spurs rounded out the top 4, and the Detroit Pistons, who own the league's worst record this year, fell all the way to number 5 in the lottery. It's the second consecutive season that the Pistons have had the worst record, but fell to pick number 5. The Rockets, that are 41-41, moved up 6 spots to get into the top 3. Washington and Detroit had the best chances to land the top pick at 14% overall. I couldn't imagine how frustrating that is because I lived in the Charlotte area when the Bobcats were unbelievably terrible. I want to say they only won 7 games that year, and they didn't win the lottery. They missed out on Anthony Davis. He goes down to New Orleans, and they get stuck with the 2nd overall pick in that year's draft. It is roster-changing, franchise-changing sort of picks here, and right now Detroit not once but 2 times has the worst team, worst record in the NBA, and misses out not just on number 1, number 2, number 3, or number 4, but Detroit, back-to-back years, worst record, and the 5th overall pick. I love the lottery, I really do, but that just is plain wrong to the Motor City. It'll take a while for Detroit to get back on their feet in their entirety, and this year ain't any different for the Detroit Pistons. Atlanta Hawks, number 1 pick in the NBA draft, late June, the 26th and the 27th. That's the show today. Thanks so much for tuning us in. As always, tomorrow, same time, same place, 11 to 1, right here on ESPN Sioux Falls.